In the flesh, we have the real McCoys.
Yep.
Okay, I'm sitting here with Milo Stillwell and PeteTrygg at the Cloquet Historical Society, or the Carleton County Historical Society Museum in Cloquet, and I've asked each of these gentlemen to give me a little rundown on logging history in northern Minnesota. And Milo, would you care to start out? Just tell us who you are and where you've been in all these
Milo
years.
Stillwell, and I was born in Pipestone County, the southwestern corner of Minnesota. When I was 3 years old, my dad moved up to a homestead in Lake Hattie Township in northern Hubbard County. And enough?
Yep. Oh, you can just give us a little rundown on your work history.
In 1907, my dad we moved over to Itasca Park, and he became kind of a foreman. They had no, Bowers was the head of the thing then, but he was in St. Paul, just to kind of work out the lines around the park and kind of watch fire and kind of a game warden at the same time. And from there, we went to school north of Itasca Park, about 3 miles. Little country school there. And when I became, well, I got a little story I should put in there, but maybe I shouldn't.
No, that's fine.
Well,
we got 2
when I was
hours.
about 7 years old, Dad was doing some state scaling down in the west arm of Itasca Park for Connor and Wilson were the logging contractors at that time, and they were called, nicknamed Haywire and Gunnysack. And he'd made arrangements to take my 2 brothers, my brother and sister and myself, my mother over for a camp dinner at noon. Well, gee, us kids got so frustrated with that, all them men around, them nice horses, and everything looked so nice right in the wintertime. We thought we'd hit heaven. And Dad went in, I said, my brother and I said, gee, we'd like to work in one of these places when you grow up. Well, maybe you can get you a job now. Well, of course, just joking. So Dad went into, we was in the kitchen at the time, so we called the cook over. He said, you suppose you could put these boys to work? Yeah, he said, we got a job for them right now, so I want to take it. We said, what? Carrying pancake smoke in the morning.
Pancake smoke.
Well, it was a starter anyway.
Did it pay well?
You want me to keep on now?
Sure, fine.
Well, we went to school and worked around. We was always with the boys there at the camp, around the forestry in the summer, and tagging along with them probably more in the way than there was anything else. But when it became about 14, 15, we'd go out and maybe cook for them on the fire break crew when we put the fire break all around the park. And so we'd follow that up and we'd do the cooking, get our board just to be out with them and learn. We thought there's nothing else to do, Well, when I became 16 years old, I thought, well, I come out of 8th grade education in this country school, couldn't go to high school, went to Park Rapids, and Dad couldn't afford to send it down there. So I asked Mr. Wilson, I said, could I get a job here this winter? Yeah, he said, you can cook tea this winter if you want to. He told me, he said, you got to work long hours and 7 days a week. I didn't ask him what the pay was. When I got paid off at $16 a month for it. And then that same spring, I went on the first drive on the Mississippi I ever worked on. He gave me an easy job doing the curves of the river so the logs didn't jam into the bank and cause a jam. And so I followed that up, and the next winter I went back and worked in the woods too as a cookie. And after that, the summertime, I'd probably have to go help at the homestead for a while, put up the hay, and then go to North Dakota and come back and go to the woods again in the winter. I followed that up.
That was a fairly common practice, I think, in those days, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
The lumberjacks, they come into the woods along in October, November, start coming in, starting building roads as the demand was. When it got a little colder, the cutters and sawyers would come in.
Yeah, that's the one.
But
Thank
then
you
they'd
very much.
work all winter and have a
Well,
little
thank you.
mud vacation in the spring when they couldn't do anything in the woods. And then they'd go on the drive, some of them would go to farms. I'd go out in Dakota or southern Minnesota or something, and they come off from that, then they'd get on to the harvest, and time they got through with the harvest, it's time to go back in the woods again. So it's just a merry-go-round.
So how many years did you do that type of work on the farm?
About 4. Then I got a steady job.
With
For the
Diamond?
state over there.
Oh,
Telephone lines and putting up single lines, and sold the cabins, repair work of every kind, worked on the trails, the fire breaks, and just always, whatever there was to do.
when did you start working for Diamond?
1923,
And that up near Orr or
I
Cousin?
started right here in the yard.
In Cloquet.
Yeah, I was yard foreman first. And I followed that too, and then I went scaling for him because I'd helped Dad and some of the other scalers scale over there with log scaling, you know. And we had no pulpit scaling at that time when I was, but I soon caught on to that. And from there I went buying for the company until about 1938. Then they decided we'd start some camps up in the northern part of the state, up around Orr, at Lake Reservation there. And I followed that too till I became 65, 26 years up there. Now all I do is try and keep out of the way of somebody else.
Well, I understand you hired your sidekick here to your left.
Yeah, we got Pete, yeah, you remember that morning, Pete?
Yeah,
Marge did. Yeah, that was in 1942, wasn't it? Or was it 43?
41.
41?
The last of December, 41.
Yeah.
Pete, maybe you could tell the folks here a little bit about where you were born and your history in the industry.
I was born in the homestead, 2.5 miles from Cook, Minnesota. And I went to school 18 there. 2 miles to walk to school and 2 miles back. And my dad sold a place and bought a place near Cook. So we went, on the first grade I started school in Cook. And I went through 3 years of high school in Cook, and then I finished in Virginia.
Oh,
4th year. And I worked in the woods, lumberjack in the woods, cutting timber, so much a piece. And I drove team for so much a month. And then I started with the Forest Service in 1928. I started working on the Echo Trail, building the Ely Bike Road then. The government was putting it in for $5,000 a mile. So we got $2.80 a day on board there. And the next year I started for the Forest Service as a maintenance man. Worked on telephone lines and portages, stuff like that.
was that all year long?
Oh, that was just in the summertime, then in the winter I was back in the woods again.
Okay.
Then I started cruising timber in 35 for the government. They were buying land then for the Superior National Forest in Chippewa. And I was shipped down to southern Indiana. They were buying land for a forest there. Now it's the forest. It's a forest there now.
Oh.
And I started working for Potlatch. Reggie Vibert.
Northwest Paper Company.
They said they had a 3 months job because they had another guy that's coming in to take my place, take the place I was gonna take, so I stayed for 3 months.
And who was the guy who came in?
Mr. What's his name over here?
Raymond A., wasn't it?
Raymond A. Smith. So I saw Vibert when I was in Milo's camp. Well, they were looking for a clerk there, and Vibert that I worked for, he told Calburn, if you want a good clerk, get Pete. He just was laid off here. I went up there. I met Vibert up there. I said, I wish I could work with you another 6 months. He said, you don't wish it any more than I do. I clerked for Diamond that year. I'd never clerked before, so I really, there was 90 men in that camp. I'd have every week I had to put down all the social security numbers and keep track of where they were. I had to go out and see what they were doing once in a while to make sure they were in the right place. And then I started buying timber for Diamond around the Orr area and delivering it.
That was in the 40s?
Yeah, 40s. 3 and 44 and 45. 47, they sent me up on Alaska Highway. They said there was a lot of popple up there. Some boss in the diamond flew over there in an airplane. He saw a lot of green popple. So they sent me up there with a popple. There was worlds of popple up there, but it wasn't very good quality. It was all the same age, and maybe 2 8-foot cuts up, it'd be a little rotten, etc. The butts were always sound. But up there they're rotten, so we forgot about that. But then I was sent out west to cruise timber for they thought they were running out of popple in Minnesota, so they were going to Colorado. A guy from Michigan or from Maine had found, he had talked to Forest Service guy, and they said there was quite a bit of timber around Mancos, Colorado. If I cruised there, I got 65 million there. And they built a popple, and then they built a plant there. But they wanted 3 plants. So I was supposed to go up to the route in northern Colorado, and I stopped at Norwood, and I looked back at the mountains there, and it was all green. And I said, geez, there must be a lot of popple up there. So we cruised that instead of going up north, and there was 75 million there. Real nice popple. It was 5 million on one section.
Oh, that's board feet or?
Board feet.
Yeah.
That's 10,000 cord on one
Section?
section. Pretty darn good, boy. So, they built a plant there, and I logged for them for the first 2 years. And I was transferred back to Minnesota. And 2 years later, they sent me down to the locate road for the main haul road for the loggers, because they had nobody to locate roads on it. So I went down there for 3 weeks. 15 miles of main haul road I had to locate. It took a little while in that month, you know. But I worked Sunday and all, because they said you could only be there 3 weeks. So I came back here, and then I was buying wood here. And I finally got to be in charge of wood into the plant. And then in charge of buying timber. Well, I bought a lot of land. I bought 40,000 acres of forest land for Diamond.
In northern
40,000
Minnesota?
acres I bought. And it was pretty cheap at first in the 50s. The first 10,000 acres averaged $7 an acre, land and timber. Now the stumpage is, what is the stumpage? $30 a cord for
Yeah, as much as $30 a cord.
So then I retired in 73, wasn't it?
About that, I would say.
73.
I don't just recall the year.
I haven't done this thing since. Oh yeah, I ran a lot of lines for quite a while there, for old Silky. And I do a little wood carving to keep busy. And I'm healthy, I haven't got any pains or anything.
We understand the 2 of you are taking on grain trucks now.
Yeah,
On
we
your
took
spare
on a grain
time.
truck, but we didn't do very good. The grain truck won.
They didn't stop for us.
Grain trucks usually do, I guess.
He stopped 300 feet from there, he was going so fast. So he was really coming.
It's lucky we wasn't a few minutes, a second or 2 ahead.
3 seconds earlier, and we wouldn't be here to talk about it.
Yeah.
He would have hit us. 3 seconds later, he'd have been by us. We would have missed him. So it was pretty close. It was just
A few seconds.
Just a few seconds here and there.
Now, between the 2 of you, you have, what, 180 years?
At least.
You never talking 3 seconds one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Mainly what we're going to do this afternoon is to go over the mock-up of a lumber camp that Milo and Pete have built over the last few years. How many years did it take to make all of this?
Well, I think I moved up there in 78, and I started the shop in 79. And I worked steady at it until I moved down to Carlton, and that was in 89. The first part of 89, the last part of 89 I was in the hospital.
You worked at it pretty steady for 3 years, though. I think you worked at it pretty steady for 3 years. Steady.
Oh yeah, every day practically.
Yeah.
Wasn't many days I missed.
Yeah.
And I monkeyed some before that, but not a great deal.
And I made a few carvings for the helper, and I didn't know it was going to be in a museum. I'd have done a better job, I think. I just cut out a few guys to make it look good.
There's quite a crew here.
This is Shorty here.
That's Shorty. I got another one shorter than he has you for that little farmer dress, that sleigh I got down there.
Oh,
I carved in axes and shovels and stuff and all.
yeah. You did a lot of iron work. You were lucky to find those lanterns, though, weren't you?
Yeah, I haven't been able to find any since. There's Christmas decorations, you know.
In Duluth, Yvonne.
Yeah, I got them out on the North Road here. They had a craft shop out there.
Oh,
You know where Carlson lived out there for a while?
Yeah.
North of his place there.
Okay, fellas, it took roughly 10 years then to make this logging camp scene. In the woods, in reality, back say in 90 or 100 years
The
ago.
office, Pete, you worked in the office. You know as much about that as I do.
Yeah, what would be the first thing to happen in development of a logging camp? The very first thing at all. Obviously, in most cases there was nothing there before. Why would they build a camp? Why would they build it? Where they built it? And how would they go about forming the thing? I guess.
well, they depended on the timber cruiser. He located the timber, and he located enough in one area to build a camp. So
They wanted to have
it wasn't just 140, it was a lot of 40s together where they could work a mile from the camp.
centralized as much as they could.
And then they relocated a good place for the camp in the center of it where there was.
Water was another big object in the camp to water the horses.
And it was up to the cruiser to locate the roads too. But then they hired 4 good men to build the camp,
What kind of men?
Finlanders.
Okay.
Never use a level. You would take the handle of the axe and hold it up, and
Sure.
when they're putting up the walls, if the axe was straight up and down, that's level enough.
And they had a team of horses. They pulled the logs up, you know, with this, they call it.
Crosshaul.
Crosshaul, you know, rolled them up to the horses with a long decking line, you know.
Well, were a lot of camps like the one we have here that we'll be getting to in a minute or so, were they located on railroad spurs, or were they located on water, or were they located on tote roads, or
Well, they were located near water where they have a water supply. But they'd build a railroad. Well, they probably wouldn't hit the railroad there, but they'd build a railroad into the country, and they'd have a log and or camp maybe 5 miles from there, 4 miles from there. They'd haul to the railroad
railroad
and
siding.
dump it there, and load it up in the spring, keep loading it as they went.
So in the early part of the century, there must have been literally hundreds of these camps around the woods. I would
There
think.
was a lot of big camps, 200-man camp, V&I all up north here. They had some large camps. You remember some of them camps, Pete?
I figure in the spring, sometimes it would melt all at one time, and all the camps would close, and the plumbers actually come down to Virginia. 2,000 lumberjacks would hit Virginia, Minnesota within 48 hours. And they'd paint the town red. When they were broke, they went, like Milo said, back to in the woods or to a farm.
Occasionally on a landing, they had a small camp, take care of the landing crew or something like that, but that was about all. Once in a while, you'd find a camp close to the railroad or a branch line especially. They'd run into the thick woods, then they'd have a camp there where they could take it out of there if there's any. Depending on where the timber was and what the facilities was of getting it to there.
And the terrain, I suppose.
The rain had a lot to do with it.
Sometimes they had a logging spur next to a lake. They dumped all the water into
For the engine and for the horses and everything. Took a lot of water in camps to keep them going.
They had to post the logs out.
Yeah.
Those guys that worked on the logging in the spring, they were pretty black because they were next to the water and the sun would shine on them. They get pretty black from the sun tan there.
See, now that's something that nobody knows except you guys, and nobody would think of that. And it's something that would be lost forever if we weren't doing this, I suppose.
It took, depending on the crew, you had to have a,
I talked to Al Weir. He was an old VRL foreman, and I worked with him up in Concord. And I said, "What is the best you ever took when you were in log camp? What's the biggest volume?" Well, on 440s, 9 million is the best I ever did. He said, 9 million on 440. That's pretty good wood. That's pretty heavy stand.
that's a lot of wood.
It'd be 2.25 million on 40.
Where was that
That was
operation?
North Virginia, up there, cousin area.
This brings up another question I'd like to ask, is mainly when they were harvesting this big pine, it was white pine, wasn't it?
Mostly white,
Well,
a lot of Norway too, but yeah.
Why was white pine the preferred species? Or was it just that there was so much more of it than anything else? Or?
It was easier to build with, so. And all that lumber went to Nebraska, that country where they were building up the country, and then east or west in Canada. They didn't have any pine in Canada. So all this stuff that went north, they soldered up at Kenora there, and all the boards went west to build all the farms that were started up there. They were all starting, the whole country was starting up then in 1900.
And grain
1980s
elevators?
to 1920. So all the lumber they needed all that lumber, so they cut it just in the right time.
And the white pine was better for carpentry and finishing carpentry and that stuff.
Yeah.
I understand Norway pine was used a lot in mining pilings and trestles.
for,
joists and studs and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Or square timber.
More
stuff like that.
strengthened than white pine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
stronger. And mining timber. Smaller stuff went for mining timber.
Yeah,
Tamarack too.
out of it went mining.
Tamarack went for mining timber.
Yeah, I'm just for a few minutes going to ask you about all of the ones I can think of, the various duties that there were in these logging camps, the various jobs, and if you could fill me in as to what each man's responsibilities were, and maybe in some cases what they weren't. When you talk about logging camps, everybody thinks of lumberjacks, and I think of the guy with the plaid shirt on out sawing trees down. Now, I'm assuming you'd call those what most people think of as a lumberjack you would call a sawyer. And what would his day entail, or what were his basic duties?
There was two men on a crosscut saw. They'd saw down trees and saw them up, and then they had a swamper to cut the limbs off. So they just kept on sawing all the time. They sawed a lot of wood that day.
They're stripped.
We're having just a little bit of battery problem here, so we'll try to back up and get to where we were again. We're talking about each team would have a 50-foot or 70-foot, depending on the timber strip to harvest. And I guess I never thought of that in the past. That this would be a strip of timber running off of a skid road or something, or
That's right.
perpendicular to it, or
Yeah.
oh, okay.
And they control the cutting so every tree would be cut, so they wouldn't go all over it.
And there was a checker always too, and he was kind of look after the sawyers a little bit, besides checking the pulpwood. Now on logs, of course, that was skidded on the landing and scaled there. But pulpwood usually was scaled in the wood, or I mean checked for pieces, not scaled, just checked how many pieces.
And the old cabs, they worked by the month.
And sawyers used to,
No piecework.
no, there was no piecework couldn't find.
I imagine if everybody had his own strip, it was more safe that way too, in terms of trees coming down. You weren't dropping them on each other.
They were young fellows, and there'd be a couple of Swedes, they'd ask the two Finlanders, how many you cut today? 89. Oh, we cut 95. And they'd give her heck the next day.
And they'd have a bucking board at camps, you
Working
would
by the month.
Yeah.
Young, full of cup, you know. Lots of pancakes in them. They
Yeah.
worked like that.
bucking board.
Well, I was going to tell you about the logs when they went north into Canada.
Yeah.
There was a railroad from Two Harbors to Tower, but there was no railroad between here and Two Harbors.
Okay.
So they'd go by boat to Two Harbors, then they'd go by rail to Tower, then they'd go with horses from there west. They call it the Tower Itasca Road, and that was to supply the camps on the Big Fork and Little Fork, all those rivers up there. They had camps on the rivers. They cut the logs and float them into Canada. Went up to Lake of the Woods. There they sawed them. They had two big sawmills up there. All the logs went west.
Oh,
This is that part of it. But then VRL, they stayed right here and had loggers birds way up past Cook and up Tower or to Cousin. And Boise, they came south from International Falls, covered that.
They hoisted out of Oyster Bay there in Namakan, not to come into Virginia.
Yeah.
But some of that, a lot of that logs up in that country went up over the dam and they went into Canada, you know.
Yeah.
That's about the dividing point there.
Kettle Falls.
Yeah, Kettle Falls.
I was there cruising one time. My dad worked for a fellow by the name of Lige Pennington in 1903. In 39, I was up there at the dam up there. There's an old guy up there. He said, when I fall down snow, now I have to roll around a long time trying to stand up again. I said, what's your name? Lige Pennington. I said, are you an old camp foreman? Oh, sure. I run camps down the top of there. But he didn't remember my dad. I told my dad about that. He was pretty excited about that, but I saw Lige Pennington. He was a good friend of his.
Well, he was a camp foreman. What were the duties of the camp foreman? He was actually the
Well, he had to line up all the work.
the top guy in the.
Straw pushes under him usually. That's the sawyer crew, the skidding crew, and loading crews.
Yeah,
Okay, those are the straw bosses.
Yeah.
yeah. The camp clerk took care of all the payroll and stuff. There was no social security then.
Yeah.
That was easy, I
You
guess.
have little Wanigan always in the office, tobacco, and no candy in the early days though. That's one thing they never allowed in camp, and I never knew why. But you could get tobacco and necessities of clothing, wool clothing, rubber, mittens, gloves,
You hear some wild
underwear.
stories. You hear some wild stories though. A guy says he went to the camp, he didn't have permits, so he went bareheaded all winter, 30, 40 below. I said, gee, you could have charged a pair. He was telling me that he couldn't charge a pair, he could always charge a pair.
Yeah.
That's a one again. You always give them if they're working there. So he didn't go all winter without a pair of mitts. He was just fooling you, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, I've been looking in some of Buzz Ryan's books, and he always brings up you had the cook and a bull cook and a cookee. Could you explain what those folks were and what their relationships were to one
You
another?
want to take that, Pete?
You would take your money.
Well, depending on the size of the crew, one cook would take, what was it, up to 100 men, was it, a cook?
Okay, for every 50, isn't it?
I don't know, anyway, he had 2 cookies. Well, then for every so many more men you get into camp, you'd add more cookies. And then sometimes in the camp, if they were real large, we had a cook that done nothing but the baking. Like the bread and the cakes and the pies, and the other cook was meat and vegetables.
Call them first and second cook.
It varied, yeah. And then you had the bull cook in camp. His job was keep the bunkhouse in order and assign the boys to their bunks to sleep, and to wash the floor once in a while and carry the water in the wood. He done that for all the buildings, the cookhouse, the bunkhouses, and the office buildings, and so on.
I think
And you
that's
had the
the
blacksmith.
I think that's the job I've got out at our hunting cabin.
And you had they called them swampers. They swamped out the building, scrubbed out. And then you had the blacksmith, of course, and then you had, with the blacksmith, there's always a handyman or two. And sometimes you had to have a helper for the blacksmith. Getting a lot of iron that had to be held, usually the handyman would help him, but in some cases you had to give him extra man a day or two.
They call them wood butchers, the ones that made those graves and stuff. But
Yeah.
The wood butcher.
The wood butcher, yeah.
Carpenter work.
And they called the blacksmith an iron burner.
Yeah.
And then, let's see.
But the bull cook had to have good wood for that cook. They'd bring in an old pine, dead pine, right, and he'd cut it, he'd measure every one of them so they're exactly the right to the inch.
For good
Saw them off and split them up and bring them to the cook.
Some was
consistent
18
heat, huh?
inches.
18 inches or so.
Depending on the length of your firebox in the kitchen, you had a battery of 2 or 3 stoves all the time, you know.
Some of those cooks
All
were
wood
pretty
too,
crabby. Some of those cooks were pretty crabby too.
bet.
Well, my understanding from what my grandfather related to me was that in a lot of cases the cook could almost make or break the camp.
That's right. If you didn't have a good cook, you didn't have a crew.
They went to where they had the best cook. They didn't
Yeah.
care.
After all, that's all a lumberjack got out of life. He was surviving on good food and a place to rest. He didn't have that any place else.
Story about 2 lumberjacks, they put everything on the roulette wheel. Been there 6 months. They lost it all in 2 hours. He says, well,
Good.
easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
No, that was the only home they knew.
Yeah.
And everything they owned was in that pack sack.
It's a good thing they had prunes. They were regular all the time.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
Now, if you had a poor cook,
They were healthy, boy.
your crew would go down the line pretty fast, but if you had a good cook that was coming in,
As long as we're on that subject, what would a lumberjack eat? Let's say from the time he got up in the morning and had breakfast until, what were his meals during the day?
Milo is the cook, you know.
yeah. Bacon and eggs usually, eggs practically every morning, could be ham too, fried potatoes, and sometimes oatmeal cereal, no dry cereal, we never got that. And
Pancakes.
pancakes, lots of them. I've seen the time when they take a wash tub and cookies with frying pancakes and put them in a wash tub, and then you drag the wash tub down the floor between the tables and lift out pancakes, keep the plates filled all the time. That's for a lumberjack to eat 8, 10, 12 pancakes. And if you get bacon grease, he wanted that on top of
Yeah, pour that on top.
healthy.
instead of syrup.
There was no cholesterol in it.
No, you had to have heavy food.
I was sitting by a big fella in there one time, and when I was done, he took 4 more pancakes and some more, a couple more eggs. And when he went for the door, he took one suspender off. He said, every morning he did the same thing. He was heading for the can.
Oh, really? It's regular.
They could eat. We had toast, graveyard stew, milk toast. In that one camp headquarters, put there every Thursday morning, but you had the meat to go with it too. They called it graveyard stew. It was good as all condensed milk too, it wasn't cow milk, that is fresh cow milk or anything.
And prunes they call lumberjack strawberries.
Yeah, yeah. Loganberries.
Loganberry.
Yeah. Oh, and it's one thing, you had a good cook, you had lots to eat. They had a good variety, a lot of vegetables, and,
You had to eat and get out of there. You weren't allowed to talk or anything.
Okay,
You
that's,
weren't allowed to talk at the table.
no talking at the table.
Yeah.
Say pass this or pass that.
why was that? Just to keep things
Well,
moving?
they all got arguing and fighting and over their jobs in the kitchen that you couldn't have stood it. We had one old fellow, Blueberry, Frank Herner, you remember. He'd been out at picking blueberries. He always wanted a couple of weeks off to pick blueberries in the summer. That was his vacation. But he got back to camp and he was hungry, of course, and he was a big eater. And he was sitting on the end of, about the middle of the table. We had it set up for 8, every 8. He said, pass the beans. Nobody paid no attention. Pass the beans. Nobody paid any attention. He said, God damn it, pass the beans. About that time, the cook had him, took him out the door.
Oh, really?
When you learn not to talk, you can come back. No, that's the way it's been. It's been hollering all the time amongst themselves. And you never see 2 lumberjacks walk side by side going to work. Always one behind the other.
To break trail?
Well, I think that is one reason they had a trail and they'd all follow that. But even in the summer months, it's the same thing.
The camps far from town, if they'd fire a guy, they'd fire another one to go with them, so you
Yeah.
didn't have to go down alone.
There's a story out on McGugan. Well, it happened. I told you heard it the time he called up every mile post. Good God. That was pretty good. That old Charlie Lowe hired him anyway. Yeah. And then around the landing, there's always somebody kind of in charge of the landing, kind of a straw boss. Had to have somebody in charge, otherwise you wouldn't know what is going to happen.
Back on the meal times, what did they do for the noon meal? Certainly all those guys didn't come back into camp.
Well, you had a limit there. What was it, a mile, I think we said? If you're over a mile from camp, then you use the swing dingle, take out hot lunches. And here's a fireplace right there for meat, noon luncheon. They had coffee boiling, that's what that represents there. Only they didn't have peeled logs, they sat on whatever they could find.
They ate on tin plates, and if you didn't eat right away, they froze right to the plate.
Yeah, you either had to put your back to the fire there, the beans would freeze on the tin plate.
Yeah, they would.
It rattled.
Every day's a picnic, huh?
But the food was good. The cookie or the bull cook usually brought out a swing dingle. Let's see, there's one there somewhere, right there.
Okay, we'll
Thank
get to that in a minute if I don't run out of
One
battery.
horse
power.
deal. This is it right here. They call it swing dingle. And you had only a bigger dray in this, and And this here thing here, they'd put their soups and stuff, big kettles, you know. And then it'd be covered, and then this other one, that is for cakes and pies. See, they could slide them in there in a little nut so they wouldn't slide out and slide around. And then they'd put a blanket over the whole thing and close it all up tight, and that'd keep it pretty warm till they got out to the campgrounds. Poor fellow, he fell down off.
No workers' comp in those days either. Oh, what about evening meals?
That's always at camp.
That was a big meal too.
That is probably the biggest meal of the day, except on Sundays.
I was at that camp with Grand Rapids there. They were talking about the cooks. They said the evening meal they had cold cuts and salad. Why? I said, you gotta change that right away. That's the biggest meal. Heavy meal for supper, you know.
Sometimes on the Christmas Day, or if it was possible, we'd get a little lettuce. You know, the lumberjack called it hay.
I was in the
No
blacksmith.
fresh food.
No fresh
I went in
food.
the blacksmith shop at that camp at Grand Rapids there. They said they changed shoes on the horses every 8 days. You know, I said, you gotta change that. They were on all winter. Most of them, you know.
You
Every
know,
8 days, he said, that blacksmith was busy boy.
I had an
Yes.
argument with that fellow. You know, they was using them pork screw in
Oh, yeah.
on them shoes there, that blacksmith shop at Grand Rapids.
Oh.
I said, well, I never seen them. Well, that's the kind they use on the sleigh hauls. I said, wasn't it? I said, they're no good. They had regular corks. The blacksmith welded a cork on their shoe. Well,
Sharp, but sharp.
What exactly is a
weld this on, see? That's a cork.
And this one was sharp. One of
Yeah, how they turn these down to be sharp, they haven't got any here.
No.
But these corks get dull,
Unless
and
you
they
get-
have sharpness.
Yeah, that's been on for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 months.
That's been put down pretty
Boy,
good.
wore pretty good.
Here's a horseshoe the way they got them in camp, just a plain shoe.
Yeah.
They had to put the cork and fit them to the horse, make the shape and everything. That's the same size shoe as this one.
Threw some powder in there and it'll stick, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Did pretty
there's
good.
the spikes on that deal. That is a summer shoe, that's what that is.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they haven't been down
Oh, that would
straight.
never make it in winter. I think I've got one. I'm gonna bring it over here.
I had some up at the hunting shack, but I suppose I never got them.
what kind of meals would they have at the evening meal?
Oh,
You know, what kind of food?
we had lots of beans, lots of prunes,
Lots of meat too.
lots of meat and potatoes,
Beef mostly?
and maybe it would, sometimes you get carrots or rutabagas or something like that. Onions, of course, always, and soup. We got soup once in a while, but not too often.
All the bread you could eat too.
You ought to have been around them camps when they's eating soup, but you could hear them clean around the table.
I was watching a cook once. He had a sponge that big around and about that high, making bread. And he'd cut out 2 loaves of bread and he'd go like this, put them in the pan. Boy, he was fast. He was quick, boy. He got rid of that sponge in no time.
Them bread loaves in camp are 20 inches long and about 7, 8 inches this way and about the same height.
Well, they had 2 cooks. The first cook did all that and donuts and everything. The second cook took care of the meat sponge.
Pretty good trick to cook a loaf of bread that size
Oh,
with wood heat.
They didn't last long. There was a lot of bread ate at camp, and then there was a lot of there was a lot of everything ate. Potatoes too. They went heavy on potatoes.
they had a lot of donuts there.
Yeah.
Donuts.
Very seldom we ever got a baked potato. It's always peeled. The cook eats on the peeling of
What was
potatoes.
it they call fry cake? Wasn't that donuts?
Huh?
Fry cake, they'd say.
Oh yeah.
No donuts.
If it floated, there's a donut. If not, there was a sinker. During the rationing days, we at headquarters camp, Pete, that's what he was doing. The rationing board come in every Monday to see if we'd getting supplies enough for men. I wanted to know how many men we expected for the following week. Would be about the same. You had a little variation, of course. You could go either way a little. And we're getting towards not the middle of winter, and so one of the office men asked, could we bring up the office crew some evening, have lunch here with the camp. We had a nice clean camp, and little Emil Ringo was cooking, he was spotless. And he was kind of a comedy anyway, little Finlander. I said I'd better go over and talk to the cook, see if he'd feel willing to do it. So I went over, he said, sure, we'll have it. Tell them to come in Wednesday. So they come in on Wednesday night, about 7 o'clock, and he had everything, a long dish up, or a lunch table must have been 25, 30 feet long anyway. And he had that full of everything, and he was a real pastry cook. He had these big donuts with sugar on it. Oh God, they was good. And so I introduced him to the crew that come in from the Hibbing. I think there was 14 of them. And they sat down and they started eating. Finally, one of them said, Mr. Ringo, who makes, I want the recipe for your donuts. Lady, I'm sorry, he's playing a joke on her, you know. He says, I'm sorry, I don't make the donuts here. Well, she said, who does? He says, the bull cook. We had a bull cook by the name of Joe Robsky, but his nickname was Mushrat Joe. And he was dirty. Oh, God, he was dirty. Short fella. And he smoked a pipe, a short corncob pipe, and in the years it wore out quite a hole in the side of his nose. It was right up in front of his eye like that. Well, we'd like to meet the bull cook. He looked at his watch, and he'd come around every hour, see? So it was about 10 minutes to wait, so. But after a little, the door opened, he kicked the door open, little Joe comes in carrying a lantern like that, you know. We didn't have no outside lights, so they had a lantern. And he went over to the water pails and filled them up and looked at the wood box and hot water barrels, and he went out. Somebody said, who was that, Mr. Ringo? That was the bull cook. You ought to see the donuts dropping. he said, he had to tell him as kind of a joke on him. But he was that way. They had a lot of fun in their own way. Yeah.
They had to blow her in too when they got
Yeah,
money.
got to tell them, somebody bring a good drink to one of your cooks, you might as well say he's gone for a week, then you're in trouble.
That's another question I'd like to ask. Is everybody chewed snus or smoked? Shouldn't say everybody, but it was very common. What about booze in the camps?
No. Even a drunken lumberjack was a heavy drinker. He didn't want booze in camp. After they sobered up, when one comes in sick, they said you should always hollered at him, what do you want, the priest or the undertaker?
No booze, that'd be trouble right away.
Yeah, that's trouble. No, you couldn't have that. And there's a blessing in those days that we didn't have the automobiles and the roads that they have now, because the men would have been in town more than they would in the woods. But usually the crew come in, they stay pretty well for 2 to 3 months anyway. Some of them longer. But when they went, they celebrated hard.
Well, we're sitting only about half a dozen tallies from Dunlap Island, I guess, and that saw its share of that activity back before the fire.
Oh, yeah.
No, everything seemed to be a rhythm in the camp when everything was going good. And everybody was happy, and of course the foreman was happy, everybody was happy. But when you get bad weather, then they start growling. They didn't like to, they wanted to be busy. A lumberjack was a good worker, and they were honest. But I mean, if they borrowed money from him, they were going to pay you back sometime.
Most of the jacks that the two of you had experiences with, were they Scandinavians or Finns or French Canadians or some of this?
Scandinavians and Finns probably was the most jacks in most places, although you got into quite a lot of Polish. And quite a few Indians worked in our camp too.
In the early days, there was a lot of Canadian Frenchmen when my dad worked there.
Irishmen too.
Yeah, they were tough. He said,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
not very big, but
They were tough.
they'd file a saw and they'd sight down, look at the saw, then they'd file some more and sight down. They got it just perfect without an engager or anything. They'd fight in camp. They'd grab a hold of the top bunk, board up there, and then kick a guy to the next guy across just 10 feet away, 8 feet away, and they'd kick him back. They'd really work the guy over if they got mad at him. So my dad said,
That old Tom Flonis really could file a saw.
Oh, how about the Brian Pete, this is good.
Oh, yeah, he was good too.
Did most guys file their own saws or?
He did on piecework. In the old days, they always had a saw filer shack over there. He slept in it, because all day he wouldn't have much to do, and then the saws would come in the evening, he'd file them up and then sleep during the day in his own shack. Yeah, some of them, blacksmiths used to grind, their handyman grind some of the axes, but they had a grindstone in the bunkhouse always, and one jack would turn for another to sharpen his axe, and then they'd reverse it, the other one would turn to sharpen his axe.
That was a good thing they had those saw filers, otherwise they'd have never,
Yeah,
not again, not sharp. Nobody can sharp.
some of them couldn't even get sawdust out after
No,
they filed a saw.
couldn't.
There's a lot of work went into that piece of equipment right there.
This,
Yeah. A lot of work went into that one.
Well, maybe I'll pause this thing out for a short moment, take it off the tripod, and then we can start going over the mock-up camp here, and you guys can start explaining stuff to me as to what all this is. You're both starting to look like a couple of schoolboys over there now, kind of fidgety, so I'll fade this out and then we'll get back to it. Yeah.
This axe right here and this in here, those are little cruder axes. And this on top is a pike pole for pushing the logs around in the river or lakes or places like that. Now these two here are broad axes. That is used to hew ties with, or wherever the old homesteaders used a lot of them in their homes. This is a picaroon for pulling pulpwood or rolling stuff around. These two are double-bitted axes. One is a larger size and one is smaller. This is a cant hook here, along with this one over here. This is a peavey. These three in the middle are peaveys. That's where you use them on top loading, and they use a lot of them on the river drive lakes and things.
What's the difference between a
Well, they got a spike in the end, see
you
it?
can pinch them over.
To push, like a pike pole.
They can pinch the log over too.
Yeah, and you can pinch with it. Or you could roll a log with it, just like a cant hook, this part here. And these always had a dew claw on. These just had a ring on them usually. And then this is another picaroon here. Now this is an adze. That's for if you had a barn floor laid, you wanted to slab it off on top. Well, that's what you use, with an adze like that. This is a peeling spud for peeling cedar posts and poles or logs, whatever you had.
Oh yes.
And this is a draw knife. That is used for peeling. A lot of them use that for peeling cedar posts and poles. And these little hooks here, they was claws just you could drive in to hold your pole so it wouldn't roll over on your tire or whatever you're working on. These two here are hay hooks. That's an ox yoke there, double ox yoke. This is another peeling spud over here. Now this is just a plain skidding evener. Now it had a grab hook on here so you could, two horses, and that grab hook was back here when it hung in use. This is the skidding tongs, and this is another leader outfit for a 4-horse sleigh. That went on the lead team, just like here, see? You got the same thing right there, see it? See the difference between that and the evener? And these are bottom ones here, that's just some junk I had. That's an alligator wrench, you can't buy them anymore. And that's a set for a saw gauge, and here's another gauge. Here's a jointing gauge here, and that hammer was for hammering on this here anvil like so. That's that. Now Pete, you can take some of this carving stuff down below there. Start in over there with the oxen or wherever, the snow plow is over there too. I don't know whether they're Copenhagen sign on this or not. Yeah, it is. It's snuff jar.
Yeah, snuff jar, that is stuff.
Ever, you don't find them anymore.
Anything in it?
No, nothing.
No.
This is what they call a cedar saw. Small teeth for cutting cedar usually.
Okay,
bigger
so,
teeth.
so the big pine lumberjack wouldn't be using something like that.
No, not in Milo.
And they buy stuff in a pound jar like this, or a small box that they carry in their pocket. Here's where they haul the lunch out with.
No, that was around Camp PeteTrygg. It's over here, that other,
Well, for odd jobs and stuff.
that's just a handy around the camp.
This is the best rig for skidding. You can pull this even around anywhere and grab a hold of a log and away you go instead of mucking with a chain under there and everything. But it had to be over 12 inches, otherwise the thing wouldn't stay there. Oh, the pulpwood, pulpwood. And the guy at Bemidji made these horses?
Yeah. And the potty.
They haul them, they usually haul them right to the railroad, put them right in the car.
Hold them up for him and horseshoes, so you can see them.
Here's the, here's a horseshoe that's been used in the summertime. There was no sharp corks on it for winter, for ice or anything that's made in the summer, but they lasted quite a while though, myself.
Why did they call them corks?
I
I mean, they're not,
getting on the ice roads, you had to have a sharp cork to hold them.
Yeah.
See, what they done, instead of this here being, this is a summer shoe, they turned them over flat for summer.
Yeah.
But the winter time, this here would be right down here and be sharp. And this here would be sharp too.
I'll have to bring one.
That'd probably wore down that much anyway.
I think I've got one like that. That'd be good to have here. And this is the way the shoes came in the keg.
Yeah.
And the blacksmith took care of it. He made it wider or whatever so it fit the. These are different hooks they use in their logging or skidding. What's this here for?
What? That's just a swivel hook that would work
all.
either way.
That's all. Here's a meat hook for the meat house.
Yeah, by God, there is one there.
Here's
That's a
this-
clevis that went on the end of a
What's this?
bunk. What's that, stove poker?
Must be a soap holder.
oh yeah.
And here's a stamping hammer.
You know, it's,
Each company had sometimes they had a different stamp hammer for every camp even. But every company had.
That is registered down to the Surveyor General's office.
okay, now explain what the purpose of that was.
And when they scale the log, they'd wrap it over this and the mark would stay right on the end of the log and then you know whose log it was.
Here, see like that?
Even if you put it in the
You
river.
got
they
one
could-
right there, see it? Got a stamp hammer, you can't read it quite. That's a stamp, one of them stamp hammers, you stamp the end of the log, you see it down there? JV, I think it is, see it?
Yeah.
So when you had a number of everybody's logs all piled up in the river at one time, you could sort them out.
Yeah, and then they use a bark mark on a lot of them.
This is supposed to be the Cloquet Lumber Company.
Yeah. That looks like one of theirs.
There's the sidewalks that weren't used over there. When it was muddy in the spring, they had that sidewalk, so there'd be all mud in the kitchen.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't show him the snowplow, did you, up there, Pete?
Oh, the snowplow, yeah.
That's adjustable for width.
Yeah.
I made that.
They had a big tractor or 4 horses when they pulled this.
Yeah.
But make it wide, there's a lot of snow.
Okay, now, were those for the skidding roads or?
Oh, for the main road. Yeah. Skidding roads, they didn't do much with them. The main haul roads, they had to keep them open. Can't see in there, can you?
No, it does fairly well.
Does it?
Even beyond glass, yeah. Yeah, there's that log we butt end we were looking at.
It's been hit. One of these,
Cruiser stick.
here's this, oh, that's a, scaling.
Wisconsin decimal, that is.
That's decimal C?
Yeah, that's decimal.
Yeah, decimal C. That's the best one. Others had odd numbers on it.
Yeah.
I already got my Minnesota's up to their place there and that stuff.
I see.
That should be down here.
What's this here?
Huh?
What's that thing there?
Yeah, but-
Board.
I don't know what
Tally
that
book
is.
or something?
Looks like it's been broken on the end there.
That is a camp horn there, but that's a fancy one. You never see them that fancy.
Oh, that That's what that is.
That horn there, that's a dinner horn.
Oh, yeah.
That's too fancy, so.
They can really blow that thing though.
Well, the battery on this thing seems to be holding out quite well. Maybe we should start in on things. We
I've
can.
got a little bit left here, I don't have that schooner. Here's a pair of skidding tongs here, that's actual
Oh, yeah.
skidding tongs right there. See 'em?
Yeah. Well,
The
they
same as it on that log there.
They work really good.
And how big of a log could you take, say, with that pair there?
24 inch.
Oh, between
Oh, about 10, 12 inch, 14 inch, about the biggest. It's too small though for big white pine. But that probably right now would take care of most all the logs there is in the woods.
Oh,
Yeah, I think so.
I got one at home a little bigger. Take quite a bit, you know.
That's like, now this here, I don't know much about this
Oh,
here.
you're open right
That
now,
is
yeah.
mine. I donated.
Okay.
What do you say?
I guess that's most of the logging stuff. I did have some over here. Do you think you got enough to go through with this now?
No. Now I'm getting a little thing flashing at me.
How will you get a good?
Yeah, I just
We
assumed
can
not.
come put her anytime, can't we, Pete?
Yeah, we can come anytime.
You guys wanna,
Not tomorrow, but day after tomorrow.
tomorrow being Thanksgiving Day in 1994?
Tomorrow and then Friday afternoon we're tied up, Pete.
Yeah.
Friday morning we'd be free.
I don't think they're open Friday.
You're open Friday, are you?
Oh, no, we're not, we're closed Friday.
I'll go Monday then.
Yeah.
How about Monday? Can you be here?
I think so, maybe later in the
They
day.
can give us a call and
Yeah.
one of us will get a hold of the other one.
Friday morning we could be here.
Yeah.
No, they won't be open Friday.
No. Well, maybe we should leave her at that. We've got almost an hour on here now.